to have a site as dynamic as we have here in Glasgow, which is a testament to the expertise and hard work of our employees, both within JP Morgan, but also in the contribution that they make to their local communities. And with that, I'd like to hand over to the First Minister.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mark, very much for your words of welcome, and thank you for the commitments that JP Morgan Chase has given to the City of Glasgow, to the City of Edinburgh, to Scotland, representing the significance of the strength of the company and the attractiveness of Glasgow and Edinburgh as destinations for investment. So it's a huge privilege to be at this marvellous facility and to see the opportunities that are created for the people of Scotland. This is a technological jewel in the crown for JP Morgan Chase, but it's also for our country, and a testament to the skills and the expertise that makes Scotland such an attractive location for international investment. Looking around this room today, I see many other ambitious Scottish businesses represented. And like me, I know you will be conscious of just how much we have going for us as a country. That optimism, of course, is not to deny some of the immediate difficulties. The economic headwinds are strong, with ongoing cost of living concerns impacting on consumer confidence. There is much uncertainty over the emerging nature of the global economic order. And I know that the impact of the recent employer national insurance contribution increases at a UK level is significant for many Scottish businesses. The skies are certainly darkening over the Treasury in London, with economic confidence in this new Labour government ebbing away. Change has to be more than a slogan, and I believe we urgently need a new economic direction and a different set of choices at a UK level. Alongside the challenges, there are undoubted successes, not least of which is the tremendous success of the International Financial Services District here in Glasgow, just one of the transformative developments that have taken place in our economy in the last 15 years or so. And there are opportunities aplenty in energy, fintech, biotech, space, AI. We have world-class universities which produce not only cutting-edge research, but also a wealth of capable graduates. We have our colleges who are working with employers to upskill our population to meet the challenges ahead. We have a reputation as a world-class entrepreneurial nation, with the number of start-ups, spin-outs and scale-up companies growing at pace. I recognise all that is going well, collective efforts that have seen GDP per person in Scotland grow faster than the United Kingdom, and productivity increase at more than twice the rate of the UK as a whole. I acknowledge the many fruits of your enterprise and innovation, and I commend you for it. But I'm left with the sense that Scotland's economy is not yet performing as well as it should. Given all that we have, all the advantages that we enjoy, quite simply, Scotland should be wealthier than we are today. And that's what I want to talk about today, not to wallow in that assessment, but rather to begin a conversation with you about how we act to change it. There is a danger, of course, when a politician admits that things are not going as well as they should, that such a statement launches a furious political row. My words today may be thrown back at me when I answer First Minister's questions in Parliament tomorrow. However, I think all of you here today are wise enough to understand what I mean and hear my invitation to work together to make Scotland better. Scotland's unfulfilled economic performance, compared to both peers and pure potential, is not a recent development. It's been our national reality for decades. It's as complex and systemic a challenge as poverty in our land. And indeed, I believe that the two are fundamentally connected. We will not properly address the scourge of poverty in Scotland until we get Scotland's economy performing at the much higher levels where we all know fundamentally it should be. There is so much that is good in Scotland's economy, but that should never stop us acting to ensure that good can and must become better. I began this series of speeches last week by talking about my government's top priority, which is the eradication of child poverty. I said then that a Scotland where no child lived in poverty would have to be a very different Scotland from the one that we know today. It would be a wealthier Scotland, a Scotland that was making the most of its natural and human capital. And it would also be a fairer Scotland, with the fruits of higher economic growth enjoyed not only by those who already have, but also those at the bottom end of the wealth and income scales. How, therefore, do we build this wealthier and fairer Scotland? Many of you will have heard ministerial speeches that are often just a list of ongoing actions and future commitments. An infrastructure project here, targeted support for a company there, tax and spending choices. These ongoing actions are important. They deliver positive results, concrete, meaningful progress, as I've already noted. But they're not enough for the times that we face. They will not move us beyond the current economic paradigm. It is, I believe, time for Scotland to think big so we can act bold. Today, therefore, I want to talk about three more fundamental choices we face as a nation. First, our huge energy opportunity. Second, our significant population challenge. And third, the nature of our relationship with the European Union. I've been struck by an image offered by Jane Jacobs, a name some of you will recognise from her seminal work, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Jane Jacobs is a woman who challenged the accepted wisdom of her time by insisting on a person and community-centred vision of the places in which we live. Cities, as we know them today, have been shaped by her ideas. She asked us to compare a barren desert with a flourishing forest. In a desert, the energy of the sun goes in and there is nothing to hold it. It scorches the ground by day and dissipates quickly as possible as night falls. It comes and it goes with no discernible benefit. But in a forest, the sun is absorbed by a host of plants, which in turn provide food and shelter for a host of animals. The energy is absorbed, put to good use, recycled again and again within the ecosystem, producing ever more life, ever more growth. Her image was from nature, but her lesson is an economic one. If money flows into a community and there is nothing to hold it there, if the nearest shops are miles away, if there are no locally owned businesses, it becomes, in effect, an economic desert. However, if money flows in and is kept for longer within the community, whether through a community centre hosting classes, childcare, small businesses, or locally owned and run shops, creating jobs for local people with profits reinvested and new opportunities created, then there is economic life, there is economic growth. The image works not only for the parts, but for the whole, for our communities and for our country. And it makes me think in particular about our energy opportunity. Energy, not primarily from the sun, as you can see today, but unfortunately, but from our wind and from our rain. If the generation of our energy wealth results in little more than turbines, pylons and cables, taking the energy from source to support businesses and opportunities elsewhere, then we have the risk of a desert. But if that energy generation results also in a supply chain within Scotland in manufacturing, in research and development, and a range of support services nationally and locally, then the benefits of the wealth are multiplied and begin to spread. And if the abundance of low-cost, clean, green energy we are producing results also in some of the lowest energy prices in Europe, with a fair return for generators, matched by a better deal for households and businesses, then we are beginning to see the circumstances for true flourishing. An economic paradigm shift becomes possible. Think, just for a moment, how transformational it would be for your business if the fruits of our energy activity could generate wider economic benefits within the business community in Scotland. Think, of the inexorable growth in manufacturing opportunities, skills developments and infrastructure enhancements. More made in Scotland, more competitively priced. Our country, an even more attractive location for inward investment. Households with more disposable income to spend on our high streets. But where stands Scotland today? I think for many of our communities, they would see us very much on level one. They can see the turbines and the infrastructure, but wonder where the benefit is for them. And that's simply not good enough. Yes, some progress has been made, in particular around manufacturing investment and supply chain growth. In the draft budget set out by the Finance Secretary in December, we took a strategic decision to invest £150 million in offshore wind development with the aim of unlocking an additional £1.5 billion in private investment. The Japanese company Sumitomo is investing £350 million in their new subsea cable manufacturing facility at Nigg, an investment which will directly create 150 jobs in the Highlands and contribute the critical infrastructure that we need for our energy transition. It sits alongside one of the largest industrial regeneration projects in the Highlands in decades at the port of Ardezir. And there are others, including XLCC, whose chief executive I met yesterday. Their plans for a subsea cable factory at Hunterston will create 900 jobs with substantial supply chain benefits across Scotland. Now, both Ardezir and Hunterston are made possible because of the investment made by the Scottish National Investment Bank. All good, but not yet good enough. If we are to get our energy wealth working fully for the benefit of the people of Scotland, I want to work to create a national consensus on how we can develop the energy resources of Scotland and ensure they generate sustainable long-term benefits for all of Scotland. An approach that will enable investment to be made primarily by the private sector, encouraged and enabled, however, by investment from the public sector, coupled to enterprise and skills activity that will embed the benefits of this investment in Scotland. The reality, of course, is that some of the factors influencing our energy potential are governed at UK level. The big decisions about grid connections and essential infrastructure, the big decisions that impact on the energy prices you pay, that we all pay, are taken in Whitehall. Now, that does not mean that we are powerless in this discussion. I've found that when the Scottish Government speaks, it can be all too easy for the UK Government not to listen. But when Scotland speaks with one voice, with reasonable proposals for a good and necessary purpose, then it is significantly more difficult for UK ministers to say no. So let's find our voice. Over the coming weeks, I'd like to work with people in this room, with the wider business community, to identify what we need to do to maximise the economic benefit from our energy wealth. I can give you a firm commitment that we will work collectively to agree the steps we need to put the economic success of Scotland front and centre in a way that ensures communities really feel the benefit of our enormous energy opportunity. Scotland's energy potential is huge. Over these coming decades, it will be without doubt our greatest opportunity. But over the same period, our country will also face a significant population challenge. Scotland's population is ageing. The number of deaths registered here in 2023 was greater than the number of births. The difference has been getting wider each year and is expected to continue. The number of people aged over 65 is projected to grow by nearly a third by the middle of 2045. Meanwhile, the number of children is projected to fall by nearly a fifth. For the well-being of our society and the future success of our economy, this trend is simply unsustainable. When I was first elected to the Scottish Parliament, the fear was that Scotland's population would dip below 5 million, thanks in large part to EU enlargement and the arrival of tens of thousands of young people from countries like Poland, Hungary and the Baltic states, young people who chose to settle here and build their families here. Scotland's population trajectory shifted. Indeed, The 20 years between 2003 and 2023 saw the largest increase in the Scottish population since the 1940s. The lesson? Projections are only projections. The future is not set. It is possible to shift the dial once again. That's why we need a renewed focus on an immigration policy that works for Scotland. Have no doubt, right now, we need people to come here to live and work to bolster our working age population. We need them to address skills shortages and to increase our productivity and our innovation. They're welcome for who they are, for the contribution they will make to our land, their distinct perspectives, their hopes and their ambitions. But again, have no doubt, they are essential for tax revenues, for the sustainability of public services like our National Health Service, and for the future success of your businesses, whether as paid employees or as paying customers. In recent years, nothing has impacted migration in Scotland more than the disastrous decision to leave the European Union. With the end of free movement, it became much more difficult for EU citizens to come to Scotland to make a positive contribution to our economy and our national life. And the current dominant political narrative in the United Kingdom, which in turn drives policy choices within the UK government, is only making matters worse. If we are to make the most of Scotland's economic opportunities, we need an immigration system that understands Scotland is different from the UK as a whole. I've spoken in relation to energy about paradigm shift because I believe such a step change is achievable if we make it our collective ambition and goal. However, given where we are on immigration, I think all we can hope for at this point is some first tentative steps. One such step would be retaining the skills of those who come to Scotland to learn at our world-class colleges and universities. 20 years ago, the Scottish and UK governments worked together to launch a tailored migration route designed to enable international students to stay in Scotland after they had graduated. I see no reason why this cannot happen again. I stand here ready to work with the UK government to develop a tailored visa route for international graduates from Scottish universities or colleges who want to stay here in Scotland. This Scottish graduate visa would be linked to a Scottish tax code and be based on a requirement to live and work in Scotland. It would directly support skilled individuals who want to stay here following graduation. And given the significant increase in the salary threshold of the skilled worker visa, it would give us the means to hang on to those skilled graduates. All of us would go some way to ensuring that Scotland can continue to attract and to retain international students. It would benefit our colleges and our universities before their graduation, and it would benefit our economy after their graduation. Indeed, the latest available figures show that international students generate £4.75 billion for the Scottish economy. It would help us to grow our entrepreneurial sector and ensure Scotland continues to be an attractive destination for private investment. In small but important ways, it would make our economy more robust and our public services more sustainable. It would play a part in making our communities more prosperous. Today, once again, I ask all of you here to play your part in helping us to make this happen. When Scotland is united, when we coalesce around sensible, reasonable proposals, progress happens in a way that is not possible when we are all pulling in different directions. That is how our Parliament was set up to operate. Consensus not as a lowest common denominator, the least worst option, but as a mobilisation of the mainstream. If we want an immigration policy that meets Scotland's needs, then let's come together to make that case. My final reflection today is on what I believe is one of the most fundamental choices Scotland faces over these coming decades. I believe that Scotland is a European nation and that our future lies within the European Union. And I believe also that rejoining the European Union should be our clearly stated goal and national mission. Why? Because the opportunities presented by open access to a market of 450 million people with a collective GDP in the order of 17 trillion euros are enormous for an outward-looking economy such as Scotland. And as the threat of a more restrictive global trading environment increases, it becomes all the more important to have access to the European single market and all that that entails. For our security in an ever more uncertain world, the EU is the answer. Recognising our demographic challenges, the renewed opportunity of free movement within the EU is the answer. Whether it is more lucrative trade, higher economic growth, more effective collective action on climate change, increased opportunities for learning and exchange for young Scots, for me, the EU is the answer. There are some immediate steps that we can take, and once again, I recognise what is possible given the realities of politics elsewhere in the United Kingdom. My aim today is not to look backwards in order to refight the Brexit debate. Brexit, for all its folly, has happened. Instead, my wish is that we turn our eyes to the ground that lies ahead and determine to choose a new path and a different course. Simply put, remain was the past. Rejoin is Scotland's best hope for a more prosperous future. For those of you in the food and drink sector, the immediate priority is veterinary agreement so that barriers to trade for Scotland's world-beating produce are reduced. Entry into the customs union, renewed participation in the single market, all of these are challenged to achieve unless the politics of the UK changes or we choose to walk this path ourselves. Of course, I recognise that rejoining the EU is not going to happen tomorrow. It will take significant effort and choice to make it happen. But have no doubt, if that never happens, Scotland will pay a heavy price. The simple fact is that two of the greatest issues facing the Scottish economy in the coming years are our specific population challenges and the damage being inflicted by Brexit. On these two issues, the UK government is being dragged in an anti-growth direction by the prevailing political consensus at Westminster, which is determined to limit migration and is hostile to EU membership. That consensus does not represent Scotland's economic interests. So I want to work with all of you, with wider Scottish society, to draw the UK government back towards the mainstream positions that work for Scotland. A recurring theme in my remarks this morning is the very simple idea that if we want something, if we prioritise it, if we make it our goal, then if we work together, we can make real progress towards achieving it. Now, I've set out three areas where I believe clear choices and collective endeavour are not only important, but also necessary and also vital if we are to truly prosper as a nation. If we are to see that paradigm shift that I think we all know in our hearts is both possible and within our grasp. If we do not make the most of our energy opportunity this time, if we do not act now to address our looming population challenge, if we don't commit ourselves once again to Europe and its single market, then a heavy price will be paid not only by this generation, but by all future generations. So yes, a step change for Scotland is possible, not easy, but achievable, and in my view, critically necessary. Looking around this room, looking around our country, I'm in no doubt that we have all the ingredients that we need as a society and as an economy to flourish and to prosper in the coming century. But if we want it, we have to choose it. We have to work for it. There's no way of getting away from that reality. I choose it. I'm ready as First Minister to put in the hard yards to deliver that. And I invite everyone determined to make the Scottish economy better to join me in this national endeavour. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a few questions from some of the broadcast media. I'll speak to the print media later on, and then I'll open up for some questions from our colleagues who are here in the gathering this morning. So it gives you a little bit of time to think about what you might want to put to me. So I'll first of all come to Vanessa Taff from Scottish Television. Vanessa.
Good morning, First Minister. On Brexit and immigration, we know one of the key sectors that have been really impacted by that has been the social care sector. Particularly for them, industry leaders are saying it's been very difficult for them to domestically recruit and retain staff, and they're saying that they should be worth more than £12 an hour. Would you agree with that? And given that we're in a big American institution, it would be a bit remiss of me not to ask you about the new incumbent in the White House. You had previously favoured his rival. Now that he is in the White House, we've seen a lot of executive orders over the last 24 hours. You disagree clearly from what you've outlined on your immigration policy. Does that potentially make it a little bit awkward to work with him in the future?
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. A couple of very important issues there. First of all, on social care, we do face recruitment challenges in social care, and we've been working for some time to increase the pay levels within social care with specific funding allocated by the Scottish Government, delivered in partnership with our local authority colleagues to improve the level of social care pay. But undoubtedly, one of the biggest challenges is about the available base to make sure that those roles can be fulfilled. So I think fundamentally at heart the issue is that we don't have enough people available in the working age population to contribute to that activity. Now, of course, that factor has consequences for our wider public policy agenda, because it leads to the difficulty of securing appropriate care packages for people when they leave hospital, which means that people often stay in hospital longer, and leads to congestion within the National Health Service, which we are working very hard to mitigate. So my answer on this question is that we will continue to do all that we can within the resources available to us to strengthen the pay for social care workers. But also we have to fundamentally address the root cause of the issue, which is that our population, our working age population, is just not big enough to address these challenges. And if you look at the data yesterday about unemployment, unemployment is at a consistently historically low level. I can't remember a period of there being such consistently low unemployment levels, which tells you there's a tight labour market out there. So I think what I've said on migration is designed to help that. On your second question in relation to President Trump, now, I've made it clear that following the election, whatever else was said before the election, President Trump has been elected. He will take decisions. His decisions will potentially have an effect on issues that matter to us. I've made no secret of the fact that I am alert to the danger of tariffs and the damage that that could do to the Scotch whisky industry, which is a significant generator of wealth and income and opportunity within Scotland. So there is absolutely no alternative but for me to engage with the US administration led by President Trump should those circumstances arise. And that's exactly what I'll do. It's a pragmatic approach, recognising the fact that an election has taken place, President Trump is in office, and we've got to deal with the issues that arise from that. Can I come to Angus Cochrane, please, of the BBC? Angus.
Thank you. Neil Gray had to apologise again to Parliament yesterday over his attendance at football matches. He's also overseeing the introduction of the National Care Service. Can you guarantee that you still have confidence in Neil Gray? And is the National Care Service about to be scrapped officially?
Well, there's a parliamentary statement on the National Care Service in Parliament tomorrow, so despite your tempting question, Angus, I better watch myself that I don't get into trouble with the presiding officer by disclosing the details of all of that. What I would say about the National Care Service is that I think there's very broad agreement within Parliament, within our local authority community and within the health service that we need to improve the outcomes that are achieved in social care, that the outcomes are not good enough as they currently stand. So there's a consensus about what we're trying to achieve, but not particularly at the present moment, a consensus about how to go about doing that. And what I said when I became First Minister was that I would, in leading a minority government, I would have to recognise the fact that I wouldn't get everything my own way, that I would have to work with others to find common ground, and that we would have to work together to get to solutions. It's in fact been at the very heart of what I've said to this gathering this morning, that I want to work with others to achieve good outcomes for the people of Scotland. So that's the approach that we'll be taking on the National Care Service, and Neil Gray has been very much at the heart of designing the approach that will be set out to Parliament tomorrow. Tony Maguire. Tony's there from GB News. Tony.
Thank you, First Minister. Just to ask, with further migration, hopefully from international students choosing to stay here in Scotland, does the Scottish Government accept that housing targets for building new homes across Scotland will also have to increase as well?
Well, we've got to increase the level of house building and house availability, if I can use that term. House building, yes, we still have population challenges in relation to the appropriateness of accommodation, so we need to be building more housing accommodation. Indeed, the budget settlement that we put to Parliament in December enables significant growth in the house building activity that is underway through the Affordable Housing Programme, and in addition creates the flexibility to tackle the other part of my response to your question, Tony, which is about housing availability. So there's a lot of accommodation that's not currently available, it needs repair, it needs renewal, and there are sites where we can actually, existing build houses, sites where we can improve the fabric of those houses and make sure they can be lived in by individuals and by families. So we've got to make sure we've got the appropriate accommodation available. There are too many people living in temporary accommodation just now, so the budget settlement that we've put in place, which is designed to expand the availability of housing, is at the heart of the propositions that we bring forward, and is an essential response to the potential of us having a growing population from international students that decide to spend longer here. And I think all of the evidence demonstrates to us, and we saw this over many years in the university and college sector, that when people come from other countries to live in Scotland, the temptation to live here is very significant. And that's been a huge benefit to our country. I'm worried that that benefit is not going to be as significant as it has been in the future as it has been in the past, and I want to take the corrective action to make sure that's the case. Okay. That's all the broadcast questions I've got today, so I'm very much open to our guests who are with us today, and then, as I say, I'll deal with the print huddle questions later on. So, gentleman in the second row, first of all, and then I'll come to gentleman first.
Good morning, First Minister. Stuart Patrick from Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. Welcome the idea that we build a national consensus around in-migration of talent and support the success of the universities and colleges in attracting international students into Scotland. But I wonder if to achieve that consensus we also need to think carefully about economic inactivity for the indigenous population. A national average of about a quarter of the working population, the working age population, still in economic inactivity seems to the business community to be an opportunity still being wasted for filling the chronic skill shortages that we see in industries like maritime, like construction and like engineering. Would you agree that we need more new measures to try to connect those in worklessness to the working opportunities that we have in those industries?
I think, frankly, Stuart, we've got to do both. So the in-migration is necessary, but also the tackling of economic inactivity is important as well. And we were discussing this issue at Cabinet yesterday, because we were reviewing the data which came out yesterday, which you correctly explained to our gathering today. And of course, within economic inactivity, there will be some proportion of that is people who are involved in full-time education. So there isn't the whole sort of 22% that is represented by economic inactivity is not able to be mobilised in its entirety, but there is more that could be mobilised. I think the key conclusion that I draw is that we have to recognise that some of that may involve the tackling of the complexity of people's circumstances. So what that means is that people who are currently economically inactive may have wider challenges, they may have health challenges, they may have addiction challenges, there may be educational obstacles that we have to put in place. That's why the programme for government is so anchored on the concept of delivering person-centred support to individuals. Employability support will be one part of the process. So we are working to make sure that our employability services are adequately meeting that challenge that you put to me, but also that we can wrap around those employability services some of the other assistance that's required in tackling educational challenges or childcare challenges or addiction challenges that individuals will face. So it's a complex picture that has to be addressed individual by individual to make sure that they can be supported into the labour market. Because I come back to my fundamental point, Stuart, and you'll never get the old finance minister out of me. I'm interested in growing the number of taxpayers we've got. So the more people you can get out of economic inactivity into being taxpayers, the more you support the sustainability of our public services. So the objective is absolutely right. But I think what we've got to do is recognise the complexity of what is often involved in getting somebody out of economic inactivity and into a reliable place. Now, companies like JP Morgan Chase have a very good track record of reaching into communities that face challenges and to providing the pathways into employment that exist, and I would very much welcome that. I'll come to the gentleman at the front.
Hello, Andy Whitty from Colleges Scotland. We represent all 24 colleges in Scotland. Thank you, First Minister, for your words this morning. It's good to hear what you said about the Scottish visa and also about the investment in certain areas like offshore wind and many others. To really maximise the potential there, the skilled workforce you've touched on. And I think there's a real importance to maximise it, that we're also looking at skilling up the workforce that's already in, or potential workforce that's already in Scotland, as well as upskilling and reskilling throughout somebody's career. And the college sector has a real ambition to contribute and help with that, to help drive the economy forward. Over recent years, though, Audit Scotland have evidenced a 17% real terms reduction in college funding. So the ambition we have, I wonder how the government can help square that circle where the college sector is going to be required and needed to drive this economic skilled up the workforce, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you in that. But the realities on the ground are heading the other way. So it's just how we square that circle. Thank you. Yeah,
I recognise that there's financial challenges throughout the public finances and the public services, Andy. But what we've got to try to do is to make sure that we align our public expenditure to the maximum effect. So the college sector has been given its settlement in the government's budget, which of course has still been scrutinised by Parliament. Not enough people have yet voted for it, so we've still got to get it over the line, but I'm increasingly confident that we'll be able to do that. But there are, of course, other aspects of our policy activity that can help the work of the college sector. So I've talked about various other funding streams that are available through the support to offshore renewables, through some of the work that's available in relation to our enterprise support, some of the support that's available in relation to infrastructure projects where there is the potential for collaboration with the college sector to expand the resources that are available, because obviously having that skilled population base is vital to enable us to achieve the objectives. So what I would say is, let's look beyond just simply the college sector settlement to see the other funding streams that are available and to try to make the most of those in the bargain. Yes, just there.
Good morning. Thank you, First Minister. I'm Jo Davidson. I'm Director of Policy at the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce. I welcome the comments that you made this morning around the need to work closely and to be aligned and to join the national effort. And I know from our perspective, we'd be absolutely delighted to join that national effort and make that commitment now. That's something we've been calling for quite some time across a range of areas. My question is, how does the UK or the Scottish Government, in the spirit of this collaborative approach, intend to work with the UK Government around opportunities outlined in the industrial strategy that was published quite recently? How do you intend to work with the UK Government in that effort to ensure that Scottish regions and Scottish businesses and organisations and sectors can benefit equally as the rest of the UK, hopefully well, from that initiative?
Yeah. It's a very good point, Jo, and I think I've made clear since the change of government in July the willingness of the Scottish Government to engage constructively with the United Kingdom Government, and there's a lot of areas where that's happened. I mentioned in my comments that yesterday I met with the leadership of XLCC, who are taking forward a major inward investment at Hunterston, and Scottish National Investment Bank resources are invested there, but there's also National Wealth Fund resources through the United Kingdom Government as well. And indeed, at the Port of Ardezir, there's a similar type of arrangement that has been taken forward. I would use that as essentially evidence of our willingness to align our policy interventions, because obviously, clearly, supporting the development of either Ardezir or XLCC is core to the Scottish Government's mission, but it's also got a resonance with the ambitions of the UK Government. I suppose what I'm also doing this morning is pointing out that if we're all agreed that we need to get more growth into the economy, and that's very much my position, I see some things coming from UK government level which are the antipathy of growth. So the position on migration, the position on the EU relationship, I think are real obstacles towards realising a growth ambition. So what I'm trying to say today is to encourage a pragmatic space where if we're actually all going to be focused on growth, let's take some steps that will make that possible. So the Scottish Graduate Visa will help us on some of the population challenges, an approach which gets us into the single market. The customs union would help us significantly. I often meet food and drink companies in Scotland who are thwarted by the exhaustion of trying to access European markets now, when in the past it used to be, completely straightforward. So what I'm making a plea for is us to engage in a tangible, practical conversation about how we change things. And I want to bring Scottish opinion together to say to the UK Government, look, these are the opportunities that we have. Can we pursue them? And recognising that not all of these decisions can be taken at the hand of the Scottish Government. We'll do as much as we humanly can do, but there will be other challenges that have to be, in which we need engagement from the UK Government. Yes.
Hello, First Minister. Thank you. Jenny McNeely from the Dunard Centre, Edinburgh's new concert hall. I wanted to ask a question about Scotland's international reputation as a cultural powerhouse and how we can leverage this to attract greater inward investment and enhance our global standing and reputation.
Thanks, Jenny. I think the opportunities are enormous, and I very much welcome the work that has gone on with the Dunard Centre. I was wandering past there the other day. I was intrigued by the work that's gone on, so I'll need to take a closer interest in that. So your question reminds me of the importance of that. But I see this as a huge asset for Scotland. Our cultural identity, characteristics and strength is recognised around the world, and we should increasingly see that as part of how we engage with other countries and with other investors as a consequence of the admiration and respect that is felt for our cultural sector. We took a very substantial decision in the government's budget in December to enhance the resources available to the cultural sector. I think I don't think it's. I think it's fair to say that what we committed exceeded what people thought we would do, which in a tight financial climate, I hope is received in the cultural sector as an indication that this government, this First Minister, attaches to nurturing and supporting the cultural sector. Indeed, I am looking forward very much to a series of events that I'll be attending on Saturday in this great city as part of Celtic Connections, which is, of course, a great international asset for Scotland. So I see there being huge opportunities and we should make the most of them, but we need to have good and collaborative discussions with the cultural sector to make that possible. But I think we've helped by giving the emphatic financial support that Angus Robertson was able to secure in the budget process for the cultural sector. Yes, in front now, come to the back.
Thank you, First Minister. Carolyn Lockhead from the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations. You've spoken already about the need for housing if we're going to see population growth. And of course, social housing provides a really flexible and affordable option for that. We saw a welcome uplift in the draft budget that you've spoken about. But what housing associations need more than anything to allow them to build is certainty. And I wonder if you could reflect a bit on what more the Scottish Government can do to provide multi-year certainty on that funding, but also certainty about the kind of targets that housing is going to have to meet in things like energy and the funding that will be available to support that so that they really can plan into the future to provide the housing that we desperately need.
I think the arguments you make, Karen, are impossible to refute. Longer-term commitments, longer-term certainty, longer-term planning is vital. There's got to be a combination of approaches taken through the planning system and in the financial planning system to support that. And obviously, the government's engaged in a substantial amount of direct dialogue with all aspects of the housing sector, whether it's your own colleagues or organisations like Homes for Scotland, to make sure that we get all of those ingredients correct. I think there is. I'm optimistic that we've had to operate for a number of years on annual budget cycles. I think we're going to find ourselves before the summer in a position where we have at least 3-year funding certainty. If we have that, then I think we can offer longer-term financial commitments that will hopefully give the type of clarity that you understandably seek. In relation to standards, I suppose what I need to say there is that we have commitments on climate action, which the government is committed to. We've got statutory obligations that we've got to fulfil, and they will essentially have to inform the standards that we have in place in relation to the housing sector. But we need to arrive at that in dialogue with the sector about how best we can advance on those issues. And I think, from my perspective, there is every willingness within government to do exactly that. Gentleman there, yes, sir.
Thank you, First Minister, and good morning. Corey Beatson from Inverclyde Chamber of Commerce. You spoke very passionately about your optimism for the future with the European Union, and there's certainly a lot of merit within that. But looking at the status quo for the moment and the imposition of the general product safety regulations in December, I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about how your government can support businesses to re-engage with their consumer base in Europe. Certainly a lot of members in Inverclyde have had to cease trades and sales to Europe because of them. So I wonder if you could give a bit of insight to that.
I think it's a really good example of. I cited the example in my comments about the need for the food and drink sector to have progress on veterinary issues, because that would actually offer a passport for products into the European Union. The same applies in this context as well. It's about having. What I'm trying to do is to say, we've had this debate about Brexit, and it's got to where it's got to. But beneath that umbrella of an argument, there's a number of component arguments which, frankly, I don't think anybody would really lose. Is somebody really going to lose sleep about coming to an agreement with the EU about veterinary issues or about product characteristics? I don't really think so. But it will make a big difference to your members and to food and drink organisations around the country if there isn't a tangible, practical veterinary agreement in place. So what I'm making an appeal for is, if we're going to be serious about the economic growth argument, can we make progress on some of the issues that are obstacles and impediments to that growth agenda, that might be currently in that bucket called Brexit issues? And can we get a few of those out of there and make a bit of headway so we can support the agenda on growth? Up at the very back there.
Thank you, First Minister. Ricky Bell, Deputy Leader at Glasgow City Council. You won't be surprised to know I have agreed with every single word you've said, John. My question is really about my other role as Chair of the Strathclyde Pension Fund, and I wanted to ask a question and make a plea. One is, clearly we've seen in the incoming Labour government, the new Chancellor Rachel Reeves has announced a consultation about the organisation of local government pension funds. Slightly confusing because in her Mansion House speech she said in the UK, but in her legislation it's England and Wales only. And I wondered if the Scottish Government have any intention of doing something similar. And I guess the plea is, when you're moving forward with what your stuff you've talked about today, John, and about how we get more investment in the economy, is to say to you, can you remember about the pension funds and bring them to the table as well? Because there is a significant amount of opportunity there and a significant amount of money that pension funds are looking to invest. And if we can be in a space where our investment is helping to build a better Scotland for all of us, then I think that's a win-win, not only for our members who contribute to their pension fund to make sure that they have a nice pension to retire on, but to help improve their environment while they're still working and contributing has got to be a win-win for the pension fund and indeed for the Scottish Government.
Thanks, Ricky. One of the objectives that I have had has been to, I hope it's coming across that I am investing a lot of my time in creating a more collaborative way of working within Scotland. And one of those areas has been with local government, where I feel we've made quite a bit of headway on getting to a shared agenda on a number of key questions. And I think the point that you make about the pension funds falls into that category. I would be keen to do as much as possible to align the, there's obviously got to be proper decision making within pension funds about their investment strategies, but the logic of what you put to me of being able to utilise pension fund investments to support long-term growth opportunities in the Scottish economy, particularly in reliable fields such as housing, or in relation to infrastructure development, I think that's vital. I'd like to pursue that on a collaborative basis. I think that will probably enable us to make a bit more progress, a bit more quickly. Legislation always takes time, but collaborative agreement on these questions can bring swifter progress. So I know the Finance Secretary is involved in some of these discussions, and I very much welcome and endorse the direction of travel that's coming in that respect. Right, the question over here.
Hello, First Minister. Thank you for today. My name is Mike. I work for a company called Balfour Beatty, which has been building big stuff in Scotland for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And for us, the future is very, very positive. We have a great pipeline of projects, a hospital in Fort William, projects in the Central Belt, energy projects in Lewis and Skye. So it's great. But as a business that's very firmly rooted in Scotland, a lot of what you've talked about today, I think, and particularly for projects that are in rural areas and energy-related projects, how would the government like businesses like Balfour Beatty and our other associates in the industry to make sure that we really benefit local people when we're building these projects?
I think the key point to me is that we've got a whole range of different projects which will be relevant in the sector in which you're interested, Mike, around the country. They will bring with them quite a number of challenges in some localities. One of the issues will be accommodating staff who are involved in this area, quite simply because of the upsurge in population that will be involved. So I think fundamentally the approach that we need to take is a collaborative approach with those communities, to engage actively in what the priorities will be, to understand all of the characteristics of the local area, to make sure that they can be properly built into the planning, and that a positive legacy can be left after projects have been completed. And I know that type of ethos very much is at the heart of the working ethos of Balfour Beatty, a huge range of infrastructure projects that will be required in Scotland in the coming years. So I think those characteristics lie at the heart of what we need to do. So I think I'll take this last question, I think, from the front here, and then I think we'll probably have to call a halt at that. So last question here.
Marie Macklin, the Halo Regeneration Company. First Minister, thanks for giving us a new gold dream this morning for Ayrshire. As you know, I am at the forefront with my great teams on economic regeneration, and the announcement of XLCC we have been working tirelessly with as a partner, and to the college's point of view, 15 apprentices actually are currently based at Halo, so they're driving forward this economy. Is this now the regional time for Scotland, First Minister? And what can you assure me and our communities that your economic policy will continue to drive forward that opportunity and that hope that we all live for?
Well, thanks, Marie. And I think, in a sense, your organisation is a perfect example of what I'm aspiring for. It's about bringing people together into points of agreement on a shared agenda, and what Halo have been able to deliver demonstrates the value and the benefit of that approach and that collaboration. It's interesting in my conversation with XLCC yesterday, just the degree of emphasis they placed on partners working together at local level. So it was about the college, about local authority, about organisations like your own, whole variety of stakeholders coming together to create a common platform of activity. And that's, to me, all the lessons I've learned about economic development over my own personal career before I entered politics and my career as a minister. At that point has never left me of its importance, and it runs through the work that's taken forward by Scottish Enterprise, Hands-On's Enterprise and South of Scotland Enterprise. I think you raise a really important point about regional economies. Magnificent as this campus is, and I very much welcome it here in the heart of the city of Glasgow, and it's a great fueling of the city of Glasgow and the city centre, but it's vital that local economies throughout the country thrive as well. So the developments that are taking place in the Ayrshire economy, XLCC is one example of those, is illustrative of what we need to achieve in all regional economies. I've talked extensively about the Highlands. There's a lot of significant developments underway in the Highlands and Islands, and that has to be, again, illustrative of the importance of regional economies. So I want us to focus very much on the growth that we can generate within individual regional economies, and we will, and you have my assurance that will be at the heart of our policy making. And what's happening in Ayrshire is very welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your patience and for your engagement this morning. I'm very keen to make sure that we create an atmosphere of collaboration and support within Scotland to achieve our priorities firmly anchored in the mainstream of Scottish economic thinking, and I look forward to working with you to bring that about. Thank you very much.